to have just an amazing guest today. Dermot was the Chief Human Resources Officer over at ADP when I worked there. I worked for ADP for 9 years in talent acquisition. I'm still in talent acquisition now, but on agency side. But Dermot was gracious to accept my invitation, and this is going to be a great conversation. And I think a lot of my viewers will really appreciate Dermot's perspective. Dermot has also worked for such organizations as Merrill Lynch. He has been a chief on several advisory boards for up and coming HR technology companies, not to mention a senior fellow at what is it? The HR Leadership Institute? Is that?
Yeah, the National Academy of Human
That's
Resources.
it. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. So much fun. And you're doing all these amazing things. So tell us about yourself now. What are you doing now? What are some of your projects? What are you involved in?
Yeah, well, I retired. I kind of moved on from ADP. It's 2 years in this past June. It's incredible how fast it's gone. I had this thing about giving myself a timeout or a time to think at 55. I'm 57 now, so clearly I've
Yeah.
given myself some additional time. It has been great. We sold up in New York. We built a place in Florida. We have a place on the Jersey Shore. So the first year was repotting, rethinking, things. The second year has really been enjoying the repositioning, and we've had a wonderful time. I just spent a month between England and 3 weeks in Ireland, and I haven't been in Ireland for 3 weeks straight since I was 18 years old. So I'm getting to
Wow.
do things, yeah, that I didn't, haven't done in a long time, and get to see places that I haven't seen. So, and in all of that, though, I have tried to keep a little toe in the water, and it's with two venture funds and some of their related companies that they invest in. I'm an advisor to, so I've got a handful of these things that you hope you have some experiences to share and help them. And yet on my side, I'm learning a lot. VC space is new to me, in the last 3 years, and I've connected Sempervirens, for example, one of the venture funds, in with ADP. They meet twice a year. It's a great way for ADP to see this young technology that's coming up.
Fantastic.
And yeah, so I try to make the connections into the organizations I care about, people I care about. But that's what I've been doing, and it goes fast.
Well, let's just share a little bit about your experience with 9/11, what happened there, and I think it's this week that this happened, and you have some great
Yes.
perspective on the humanity of that event and what it was like. I want to hear that story, and I read a little bit about on your Facebook post earlier.
Yeah, yeah. So I happened to be working with Merrill Lynch. I was downtown World Financial Four. It's was right next to the Twin Towers, and um, I was in my office. It was early in the morning on that beautiful brisk Tuesday,
Mhm.
and I heard a sound. It sounded like one of those dump trucks in the city that kind of bounce. Right, they make this sort of boom sound. But the head of foreign exchange came down to me. Merrill Lynch foreign exchange head said, "Hey, Dermot, did you hear that?" I said, "I heard something." He said, "We think it's a small plane, kind of went into one of the towers." And so we went down the hall to where the head of the trading desk, Merrill Lynch's fixed income desks, on the seventh floor, big corner
Mm.
office, glass windows. And within about 6 or 7 of us in there with the head of the business, and I was the head of HR at Global Debt Markets at Merrill at the time. And it was right beside where the little where this just the little docking area, the boats, and so it's right there. And next thing, a jumbo. I mean, jumbo jets go 600 miles an hour. 10,000,
Right. Oh, wow.
30,000 feet up. When you see that speed when it's low to the ground,
Mhm.
it is like a bullet. So we saw it, and in a flash, it came in and hit the other tower. And it's still in my mind's eye. If you just say to me, you know, where did it hit? How did it penetrate? Popped out the other side. I can still see it. And everyone in the room, it had never happened before, right? A terrorist attack
Mhm.
like of that nature. And so everyone went, must be terrorists. I mean, there was no question. It was because the first one wasn't sure. They was a little plane. That was a lot of confusion that was going around. But then when the second one, and we saw it, and so we basically the fixed income trading floor there is like a football field, and
Mhm.
so the building was not impacted. So property management never said anything. So I said to the head of the business, his name is Kelly Martin. I said, Kelly, let's let's get on the squawk boxes, which are, between the sales and trading people. They're sort of internal, almost like a little, walkie talkies between people that work together. So we got on the squawk box as the mode of communicating and saying, we believe terrorists have hit, 2 planes have come in. We're not sure what's next. We want everyone to calmly, take your personal belongings, leave calmly, etc. So it took us about 14 minutes to clear the trading floor. It was like 2 captains on a ship. We kind of went around, made sure everyone was gone. And we told people your manager will be in touch with you. That's all we said. Your manager will be in touch. And that was a Tuesday. And by that Thursday, Merrill Lynch, unbelievably fixed income. There was 40 products. I think 39 products were up and running in an IT backup site in Jersey City. So that was incredible to see. When I was leaving the building, I lived in Rockland County. I went out to that little harbor area because there's boats that take you over to Hoboken for a train up to where I lived. And very sadly, people were looking up at the building, like holding on to each other. Obviously, many of them in tears, and they were watching. I could see what they were watching. I could hear the noises of of what was happening in terms of things falling to the ground. And then, it clicks that it's bodies. And I never looked, and I just talked to as many people as I could on my way to get to the ferry, to get to the train. I just said, don't look at that. You will never get it out of your mind. And I said, also, there may be other planes coming. You really should get out of here. That was just as many people as I could tell that to in the moment, in the heat of the moment. Got on the train. Somebody had a shortwave radio. It was like the movie Independence Day. It was like, the North Tower has fallen, the Pentagon's been hit. So it was getting these little snippets that were passed through the carriages and all the gasps that come with the news that was disclosed. Yeah, pretty awful. And I'll just end on saying that I, like so many people, was sort of stunned. And I would say between doing work, which was a good distraction, trying to help people following that, resetting up businesses and people, we all watched news. I did anyway, for every night, every minute for a month. Basically realized I'm looking for answers that will never come. And I remember sort of closing the book on sort of looking at the news and saying, look, this was so big. We're waiting for something to explain it in a way that we could, resolve. But obviously it's awful, never to be resolved. And so many people. Merrill Lynch lost 3 people that day. One of them, Michael Packer, I had worked with. He was the keynote speaker at Windows of the World that day. So Michael lost his life, and a bunch of us spent our time every year with his wife Reka, who sadly passed away not so long ago. But we would go up to their home in Westchester and have a lunch, a 9/11, sort of lunch, kind of, thinking of Michael. So I think there's so many of us that were there and around or connected, that have these very vivid, very awful experiences. But I will say, what followed it, again, this is where the human in me, what I loved was the humanity, the patriotism. Flags. I've never seen flags, so many fly so high and with such pride. And when I think about where kind of the discourse is today, in America versus, post that, that was in the face of tragedy and just horrific situation, to see the positives that come from the depths of kind of hell, to me was incredible. And it was very uplifting, and it was very motivating, and it kind of gave me a lot of energy to do what I had to do, in the months and years ahead as a person and as a leader in some of the companies I worked for.
Well, yeah, let's talk about leadership a little bit more. I mean, one of the most amazing leadership moments in your career was during COVID. I remember you having overnight to help ADP guide us through that course of you guided the ship through the COVID waters and all the uncertainty that followed. Talk about that a little bit. What was that like for you? I mean, what an amazing story. And I just want people to know Dermot is a genuine leader. And I know Dermot, from as an acquaintance and, as a mentor through the years, and he's been an avid, on social media, we support each other, but that would be an amazing story, Dermot. Would you share that? What was that like for you? I mean, it had to be
Sure, and
hard.
I think what you're referring to really is the transformation role.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
so for your
Yep.
listeners, I was ran HR for 6 years, and then we had a big activist investor, come in. It was
Hmm.
pre the pandemic, but obviously the implications of the battle that followed in terms of the proxy.
Yes. Hmm.
Then
We
it's sort of
remember those
obviously,
days.
yeah, and it all then the work that followed that bled into the pandemic, and still continues to this day. But it was really a newly created role, basically to really meet the commitments of the promises that Carlos, the CEO at the time, and the management team and the board had given to the street. ADP had never had to kind of make commitments beyond 1 year, and it was a 3-year commitment. And because of my HR background, I think part of why I got selected to do this first time role, because it was really driving the business,
Hmm.
in a certain direction. But because of my background, I didn't want it to be just about financials. I wanted it to be about our clients. I wanted it to be about our people. So kind of made it multi-dimensional, spent a lot of time figuring out what are the big, what is success, and what would the big outcome goals be that would prove, because we didn't want a guessing game here. Are we winning or are we losing? We need to be clear on that. So we had to be very clear. What does winning look like? What does losing look like? And then rally the 60,000 great associates at ADP around the world to achieve it, together. And that's sort of what we did. And I think then there's people like Srini Kutam, who succeeded me in HR,
Hmm.
who did a phenomenal job of really navigating the human side, through the pandemic, right? There was a lot
Hmm.
of,
Yes.
everybody
A lot
go
of work.
home. ADP, we went home on the 12th of March. My birthday's on the 13th, so I'll never forget it, and, head home. And then there's just obviously a lot of confusion that comes with something unprecedented, like the pandemic.
Unprecedented.
But
Yeah.
people, yeah, but people like Srini and obviously Carlos was such a steady hand through all of
Agreed.
this.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of, what we did, but that was the big part of it, was giving people a North Star on what success looks like, making sure that they felt incented and empowered and motivated to make it a fun journey together, not a painful hardship journey to deliver these results. At the end of the day, the goal, not only will we meet our results, the organization and people will be stronger at the end. So that was the thinking. And so we architected that, and I can say now in hindsight, we had no idea whether it would work, and it turned out to be a great success. And ADP continues to just rock on, today, which is, there's no better sense of pride, than to see a place continue to just shine.
What advice do you have for up and coming leaders, folks who are growing in their careers that want to advance in an environment like the economy right now that we're facing that's a little uncertain with inflation and some of these things that came about because of the pandemic, but just your leadership journey in general, what advice do you have to give to
Yeah,
about that?
no, it's good. Good question. I mean, I guess just because you've said it about with such uncertainty, I think that's the first thing. It took me probably years to figure it out, but it's acknowledge the uncertainty. When you're a young, new middle man, first line manager, middle manager, part of it you think, oh, I need to know the answers, right? That I'm the bot, like they're looking up to me for an answer. And part of the way you build credibility with your people is you acknowledge the problem, and you acknowledge we either have the answer, and if you really do, or they with them, you figure out the answer, or you don't. And so also when I think about inflation, like I'd be saying things like, let's control the controllable. So we know here's what's uncertain, right? So inflation is uncertain. We've got this horrible war in Ukraine. We got things exacerbated with China now, before that, but now even more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously the political discourse, right, kind of that's
Hmm.
happening, in the country. And there's a lot of things that are that can feel chaotic, when you put them either single by themselves as a single item or together. But acknowledge the uncertainty, and then say those are things, we can play our own personal role in trying to help. But at the end of the day, when we're here at work, what are the things we're trying to control in this fog, of uncertainty that's out there? Because we can still put one foot in front of the other. We can still navigate. We can still get to the places we want to. And if any of those clarify themselves in ways that we need to change position, we'll do that. Because I think humans can get overwhelmed. just by bad news, by bad stuff. And if you can give some sense of focus, purpose, confidence in the day to day, or one foot in front of the other, and have people focus on that, it distracts them sometimes from this bigger, kind of thing that if you overthought it, you would be overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and you would be frozen and you'd get nothing done. So I say that's the first thing. And the other little tidbit is the best feedback I ever got was my first piece of feedback as a manager, and it basically said, Dermot's a great guy. You see me, I'm always smiling a lot. He's a good guy, and I know, but he's pushing us too hard. And I really took it to heart, and I'm so glad I got that feedback as a first-time manager, because I wanted to look good. I wanted the team to look good. I wanted us to stand out as a group in terms of performance, but it wasn't landing well on the team. And so it's tied to this second message is the greatest thing you can do as a leader is knowing when to get out of the way, knowing when to really delegate, give people more room than you're comfortable with, and yet take responsibility for the risks that are entailed with that, because that's how you'll build the trust. And by the way, that's how you'll scale impact. Because if everything has to go through you, which sometimes young new managers do, they want everything. I got to approve it. You'll have a bottleneck, and it'll be you. But if you say, hey, if I can, it won't be 100% the way I like it done, but maybe it's 60% done, man. But I have that across 20 people, our impact's going to be amazing. So Deb Hughes, who works at ADP, Deb well.
I do.
Deb loved how much she loved how I delegated, so much so that she would joke, and still does to me to this day, like I'm the master delegator. So it's like sometimes like you want to be delegated because you want to be seen, given the trust and support. And in a way, I gave them so much room, the team, that now they make fun of me, which I totally will take, for being the master delegator. But guess what? They grew. I grew because there was just more throughput coming through the team. So those would be two little things I would kind of suggest for
Great
sort of
advice.
new up and comers.
What is some of your advice for entrepreneurs that are running their own businesses?
It's the same way that running a big business. I know we all have ideas, and we figure out how to either hold the customer's nose and here, take this, don't worry, it'll be fine. Really listen to the market. If that means really listen to your customers, take the hard news. I think I see a lot of people in VC land like that are, they have an idea, and they're kind of trying to force that idea into the market, instead of hear the feedback that says it needs to adjust a little bit here and there, because by listening for hard driving people, it actually feels like you're slowing down. It feels like they're, get out of my way, you're slowing me down, you're slowing.
Oh, true. Yeah.
But they are slowing you down in the short term, near term, but they are speeding you up if you listen in the long term, medium term, long term. Because now you'll take the time today to be better positioned for delivery. And when it delivers, it'll meet the needs, and then boom, it'll take off. Otherwise, you'd be like, okay, I got out of the gates fast, but now I have to kind of backpedal because this isn't work. This doesn't land well with customers and clients. So it is a skill. And entrepreneurs, by the way, entrepreneurs are the same as inside of companies. Just, make sure you're listening, make sure you're adding value, pick another product, another idea, to bring to market, if really, even though you love it, if the market's saying, or that just doesn't solve a need for me. I see too many people kind of pushing an agenda rather than really a solution.
What does servant leadership look like to you? I mean, you are the epitome to me of a servant leader. I think it's so amazing, your perspective on this topic, because I know I've seen it in action from you. You walk the talk. You always did. That was something I remember very well about you. So what is servant leadership in your mind? What is the definition, and how do you employ that?
First of all, I appreciate you saying that. And it sometimes makes me a little uncomfortable to hear that, because we all have views of ourselves, and I try to be, a good person, a better person, and I think that's what probably shows up. But I've seen people, like Herb Allison, who was a boss of mine at TI, who was my first CEO, kind of, boss, and Carlos. The two of them couldn't be more different. Yeah, they're both brilliant, in terms of IQ and business, et cetera. But I think the servant leader is the one that really will take the personal reputational hit.
Mhm.
They'll take the reputational hit for doing the right thing, even though sometimes doing the right thing, actually, everyone says, oh, do the
The
right thing.
hardest thing.
It's
Yep.
actually sometimes not the thing that looks like it's doing the right thing. And then there's outsiders saying, what do you, it's only over time, if it truly is the right thing, in some cases, that it becomes clear that it is the right thing. But at the time when the challenge is out there, it feels like, what are you doing? What do you mean you want to do a revote? Like this is something that Herb Allison had to deal with, revote with investors. People are like, they already voted and told you. And he goes, yeah, but we didn't do a good enough job the first time explaining it. So he was getting all sorts of flack. And then, of course, when took the time, got more involved with the messaging of it, got the vote the second time. But really, until that happened, people were just like ripping him apart. Like, whoa, you don't like the first answer, you're going to. But it was the right thing to do, was to get people on side of this issue. But they just hadn't done a good job. The team hadn't done a great job in explaining it for the voter. So anyway, so to me, that's just an example of, you will take the hit because people may not understand why it's the right decision at the time. And I've seen that in Carlos. I've seen that in Herb Allison. And to me, that's very powerful to observe. So you try to, right? We try to learn from people.
Absolutely.
And I've always tried to give credit where credit is due, but take the hit, when someone on your team that, you either were in agreement with what they were doing. You know what I mean? Like, you're
Yeah.
their leader. You knew what they were doing. If that backfires or something happens, so you take the hit. You let it happen. Don't put it on them. Don't go, I told them, I knew it was a bad idea. Like, the people who throw
Yeah.
people under a bus. We all know them. And I think you take the hit, and again, time and time again, you take that hit, people notice, even your peers, like, they notice, and they take that then as honesty and trust building. It pays off if you're with the right company, and if you're with the right people. You're really doing the right thing over time is invaluable to your reputation.
Such great advice. Oh my gosh. What is your take on artificial intelligence in the market today? What do you think about that? But you're probably on a few boards that are coming to market with some artificial intelligence and
Oh
HR
yeah.
products.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
Seek Out being one.
Yeah. Everyone's out of the gate. They've got stuff, I think, because it's such, actually, at least as it relates to, chat GPT, in the generative
Yep.
AI space, there's very real products now out there. So real, it can really do something. So I think this is why there's a speed to market that we haven't sort of, probably observed too many times, right, in the past. I do believe it is. I hear people like, they're hyping it up, or they, too afraid of it. Like, it's good. We need that, actually. You need that pressure in the system, and especially over time and at the beginning, to, to kind of say, how can we maximize the upside and sort of minimize
Yes.
what is definitely going to be some downsides to this, enabling technology. But I read, I kind of feel, generally speaking, it's in the category of as big as the internet. Like, I do think it is big, but like the internet isn't be all and end all now that we all use it. I think the same thing. So, this is not something I think is, going to be truly thinking, anytime soon. But there are certain things that are so powerful. I went on to OpenAI. My son was down. This is like a few months ago, and we pulled up ChatGPT, and my father is a well-known Irish musician, and so we said, write an 8 stanza poem to Dermot O'Brien, the Irish entertainer. 3 seconds, and this thing was amazing.
Yeah.
It was, and I understand enough. I'm not over detective, but I understand enough about, the bits and bytes and how, ChatGPT works, in terms of, it's the next letter to that letter that makes up a word. You know what I mean? Like I know enough to sort of, okay, that's how it works. I cannot tell you probably even more than that. But it wrote an incredible poem about my dad. And then you're like, oh my God, this, it would take me forever.
Remarkable, huh? Yeah.
Remarkable. But
Totally.
that's in
Yeah.
something that I think is based off of what's available, and also based off of, obviously, things like writing and language. but then, I think as you start to try and put it to data, and because data isn't, I don't think data is as clean and as accessible, I'm talking about sort of numeric data about things, then sometimes, text is, let's say, on the internet, and words and papers, and you know what I mean? So I have to see it work as powerfully suddenly out of nowhere, right? In terms of a data report, for example. But I'm sure it's there.
Right.
I just haven't sort of tested that. So I would, like always with these things, I tell people, don't be afraid, experiment, explore, be conscious of because I think it's really potent. It's going to be really potent to the positive,
Totally
and I think
agree.
it
Yeah.
has potential to be really potent to the negative. In a world
Yes.
of the discourse we're talking about, of disinformation, that's just going to get worse, amplified. Like, it's just going to
Yeah.
get right. So now we're going to have to figure out, almost like, what are the antidotes? Because we've been talking about disinformation for a while, or fake news, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
But I think new things will prop up. Already, I know there's tools that can actually kind of tell you that's an AI bot,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So those, we'll need more of those kind of, surface to air, missiles, to kind of help us then start to say what is more like the truth, because I do think there's going to be a lot of mud. Be very hard for people to navigate.
Well, yeah. So you worked on some roles that during your role, you probably saw the impact of the gig economy and
Yep.
1099 workers. I do a lot of gig work on the side, and some of my audience is actually, you know, gig workers. I wanted to share some of that, some of your insights with them, and thought you'd be a great resource for some of the insights that you see with the gig economy, where it's headed. Just a quick synopsis of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I always say follow the money, which basically means follow the data, follow the power of suggestion where the data is taking you. I heard a stat the other day. I was at a executive board member with Sempervirens, and someone said 46% of American workers are gig workers.
Wow.
Um, that sounded a little higher than I thought, but this is someone who's very plugged in, understands, so even if you discount that a little bit, the bottom line is there's a big labor force, and a growing labor force, clearly, from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So I think a lot of places, service providers, technologies are missing them in an organized way,
Hmm.
right? So now, if you're really a talent person, you want to cast that net as wide as possible, which should mean W-2 kind of people, gig people. But I think it'll come, because those numbers are just getting. I mean, they are already too big to ignore.
Unique, unique, isn't it? Yeah, it's a really.
It's unique, but it's also, there's entrenched players here. That's what's holding us back. There's
Hmm.
entrenched players that are so in one sleeve of the W-2, right,
Hmm.
worker, and then those that play around with, whether it's regional or sort of local dealings with the gig kind of labor in their area. Like ADP a bunch of years ago, as bought a company that does more of the
Correct.
1099 gig work, which I thought was very smart, because it's basically saying talent is talent is talent, and it has needs in terms of
Hmm.
how to onboard, how to pay, how to have career growth. And I think it was great seeing an established player like ADP get into the gig space, a bit there. So yeah, no, I think it's a powerful area. It has not been harnessed yet. So lots of opportunities for people out there to do a much better job of being able to source, engage, incentivize, and redeploy, to gig kind of opportunities, way, rather than sort of localized, whatever. I think just in a much more macro way. So I think it's a
Hmm.
very interesting space, and hopefully down the road, not too long, we'll see that it doesn't matter. The opportunities are much more available and understood, by the way, inside a company, and they're a lot more available and understood to someone who likes, the way they like to operate, which is
The balance, yeah, for
what we call
sure.
gig employee or a gig worker.
Yeah. What do you think about talent in general and what's happening with, there was a shortage of talent for a while, and it kind of, the pendulum swung one way during COVID and then swung the other way where it was really tight, and now we're kind of in an interesting place due to the inflation stuff. What's your take
Yeah,
on talent in general? And I have a lot of recruiters in
yeah.
my audience too, so.
Everything is a pendulum. Everything is a wave. It's just the nature of things. So, you know, it's a good time to be, home seller, right? Let's say versus home buyer. Those waves come and go. I think the talent, was had a lot of leverage for a period of time. Like now we're hearing, of course, with people, even with companies that said we're only going to work remote, or we're never going to go back to, now are pulling more and more for them people to come back. And now a silent strategy that's happening is companies are telling people you got to come back in. The person goes, well, I don't want to do that. Well, then if you don't show up by this date, then you're basically resigning.
Mm.
And so there's actually right now quiet firing
Yes.
going on by forcing remote to in office. And
Hmm.
they're probably terrible companies if they think they can just do that and then not give severance someone maybe he worked with them a long time. But it's a way that in theory, could let people go without paying, a severance, and meeting their headcount goals in terms of
Yeah.
attrition, whatever it is they're trying to do. Now, I've just heard that in certain pockets. I don't know
Yeah.
how
It's there.
pervasive
You're
that is.
absolutely right. That is something happening in different companies,
Yeah.
and it's kind of unethical, don't you think, to some degree?
Uh, I do, because I think this is where, again, you ask it, like, what would we do? And it's also that same company, allowed them to work remote, and maybe even
Yes.
said to them,
Yep.
that you can. And I know then what happens is, well, let's just change out the CEO who said that. Now it's a different, right?
Yeah.
Like, none of these things last beyond the life of the leader who said it,
Right. Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
It wasn't an organizational commitment. Yes, it kind of was, but companies forget that, and then they kind of said, no, that was X CEO's view, and now Y CEO has a different view. So yeah, I think there's certainly questions of, fair play, right?
Hmm.
In that. But so I do think we're at a time where talent, it depends on, what your skill set when you're value added, right? I mean, always for high impact, high value add, whether that's seasoned people in certain areas, it's kind of like, they'll always be able to find great things. And then if you're, coming up the curve, but you're in sort of the digital skill set, I think you got some amazing opportunities. It may seem foggy, and there's a lot of, but I think you've got a lot versus other skill sets that may not be as needed, or even if the conversation is maybe they're not as needed. I think that gets a little harder. So I would just keep telling people to keep updating themselves, keep challenging themselves. It's not hard to become better, more aware, more alert, more informed, actually more skilled in digital stuff. And so you don't have to have the hang up about feeling like you're digitally ignorant. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just put yourself to school a little bit, and now you've got, a little more, because sometimes it's not about that you have to be so good at it, but you don't want to come across as being, have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the most exciting things right now, this is a great time to have a career, and career management is an important thing. I mean, I tend to say, to some friends of mine, you're the CEO of your own life, basically. And what are your thoughts about just being the best in your career? Just really, if you're trying to find that niche, you're trying to, maybe you're younger, or any stage of your career, really. What kind of advice do you have about owning your career and having it be the best it can be, no matter what you choose to do?
I guess because, I guess because I'm not, I mean, even though it sounds like I could be very ambitious, I'm not as ambitious as I could be. Right. And I know that from people saying you should do this, you should try and become CEO of that. Like, and I've had no ambition for that. I never had ambition to become head of HR. It sort of happened. I was
Hmm.
very fortunate. I was 37. I was super fortunate. So that's 20 years ago. And it sort of happened, and you go from there. But I'm giving you the background to tell you my
Sure.
experience,
Yeah.
and therefore
Please.
my bias. So my bias, or my instincts, tell me sometimes it's probably a big put off for people to be. There's some people who love about the challenge to be the best, but I think they're in the minority. I don't think, because to be the best at something means sacrificing other things. It just does.
Mm.
So what is the best? Is the best like CHRO, with the same wife, for decades as a CHRO, with great, healthy, kind of self-confident children who have a relationship with you. Like, you can start to, right, kind of pan it out. So I think the best is about having that portfolio and defining what portfolio works for you. And then,
Mhm.
even beyond the best, being really good at what you do. I admire people every day that I see, whether they're making a coffee, whether they're putting in a window, whether they're, you know, doing our landscaping. I mean, from sort of fundamental roles. But when and we've some painter we've used for years, he is such an expert on the chemicals in the paint. You know what I mean? Like, he is just an
Yeah.
expert, and he does a beautiful job painting. But it's not just this surface thing. This guy has gone to school. He literally is like a PhD of paint, and I just admire that in people who just, they have a profession and they just get really good at it. Does it have to be the best painter, in the world or out there? And I think that's sometimes a bit of a mistake, because that could feel such a big bar for people. But
Mm.
if it's about being your best in what you define for yourself as a, my career, my family, my own personal experiences, because I'd like to travel more, you know what I mean? Let me the best there, knowing that the best will have moments of failure and flaws. But when you look back at yourself, wow, I did improve. So I've always written down my 5-year goals. I'm a big New Year's Eve, person, clean slate.
Cool.
But I have 5-year goals, and my three themes always have been, family. And I literally describe the relationship I will have with my wife in 5 years, the next five, with my children, where I'll be, because they're at different stages at different times. Then I kind of go into, sort of learning. So, like, for self-development. So I play guitar and piano a little bit. Like, so how many more songs? How much better do I want to be on a guitar in 5 years? Or, you know what I mean? Like, kind
Yeah.
of, do that. And then I have the financial side, which is just, to me, reality of life. I'd like to be able to pay off a mortgage, like, whatever it is. So where will I be in my finances, whether it's mortgage pay downs, whether it's less credit card debt, what is it that in 5 years, it looks like this today, what will it look like, in 5 years? And that has worked for me, just to keep me on this broad stroke, looking back, self-evaluation. I look at all the, kind of go, wow. I kind of always say then, some of these things, I got lucky on some parts. Things are never a straight line, right?
Hmm. Life
You have
happens.
challenges. Life happens. That's why I like 5 years, because life definitely happens every day. So any given year, a lot of things can change, but over 3 to 5 years, things tend to even out.
What I'm hearing you say is that you need to be balanced as a human being. You can't all be about work on the extreme. If you like what you're doing, great, but you need a balance that's going to make you happy at what you're doing, or you're not going to be your best. Is that what I hear you saying? It's like try to balance it out.
That's I can only say that's what it means for me, because I do think I don't want to
Yeah.
be, conceited and say that's what should work for everybody.
No, yeah, for sure.
There's
Yeah.
some people who all they want to do is work. They don't care about having a relationship with a human being in sense of a romantic relate. Like, that's not who they are. It's not what they want. This is what they want to do. And as long as it truly is making them happy, not just in the short term or in the long term. Like, who are we to say, oh, I feel
It's a good
bad
point. Yeah.
for Bobby, he doesn't have someone, he's always working. But if he loves that, if he's thriving on it in his definition of thriving, good man.
Yeah. Well, and for me too, I think that, I agree with you. Balance is so important to our mental health as well. I mean, I think look at the folks who have heart attacks at early ages.
Yeah,
The problem is that they didn't balance. Like they just, they may have been driven, and being driven's okay, but
yeah.
it catches up to you as a human
So,
being when you're drive, and you don't take a break. You're
yeah,
gonna you're gonna you're gonna burn out, and that's a really hard thing.
yeah.
So
Some of that is just genetics, and then some of that is genetics plus exacerbated by lifestyle. Some of it's not even genetics, but it's just lifestyle. Like, you're right, it kind of
yeah, yeah,
it
for
it
sure.
it 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 runs the range. So yeah, so that's kind of, I think that balance is sort of what worked for me. I heard a great thing once, and it's always stuck with me. And it's like, live your life like you're writing, your tombstone or your obituary.
Mm, yeah. Yep. What do you want to be remembered for?
I
Yeah.
don't. If anyone
Yeah.
has a mention on my tombstone, was a great HR guy, I'll be so disappointed. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
so
I.
on your, like, in terms of what people want to remember you by and the people who loved you, that's the other thing. In reality, it's never about. This is crazy because we spend so much time working. It is never about the work.
Mm, yeah. Do you have any parting advice? I mean, we're at the 3 minutes left mark because I know you got to get
No,
to your next meeting. But
all I'll say is thank you for asking. I was happy to say yes. You had a great positive, both in terms of impact of results and impact in terms of culture at ADP. And I do watch, some of your LinkedIn. I think you bring a positivity, which, my nature, we're kind of the
well,
same.
thank you.
And
Likewise.
I really like, the people who put good energy, out into the world, and we need more of it.
Well, this was a great conversation. And I think there was a lot of learning here that my audience will take away. Dermot, thank you. What a wonderful conversation. And I wish you all the best in these retirement years. And you're not really
Yeah,
retired, you're
thank you.
still on advisory boards. So you're
It's very
still
light.
doing
It's
work.
very light. It's
Is it?
very light.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
very light. Which I
what are you
which
doing
I
for fun these days? What do you do to keep yourself busy?
Yeah. All right. So fun. I've always run, so I'm still running. I've taken up spin bike when the weather is either too hot or too rainy. So exercise most days, or swim in the ocean, and then my wife and I took up golf together.
Oh,
So
good. That's great.
little over 2 years ago, neither of us really played. So we have some of that together. Of course, we're playing a little pickleball. And we're traveling. We're well-known hosters, like, so we tend to have people visiting and hosting, and my sisters and Moonside, how do you do it? Like, how do you not get tired? So we tend to like people, and so we've been able to do more of that because we've more time. And then of course we
Wonderful.
went to Ireland, and we end up going we said we go for 2 weeks and we stayed a month. So that's the beauty, is when you have that freedom to just say, yeah, let's double our vacation, which is probably one of the greatest gifts that comes with stepping out of the day-to-day work.
Well, this was a lot of fun, Dermot. Thanks for coming on. Where's your next? This will go live, and you can share it with whomever you'd like in your network. So I will share it on my channel and also on
Terrific.
LinkedIn. So, but yeah, thanks so much.
All right,
Uh,
thank you very much. Thanks for asking.
you bet. You bet. All right.